Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take a few moments this afternoon during this special order just to go over some highlights of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act as we continue to see very robust economic growth happening across the country, and including in my district back in western Pennsylvania. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is the culmination of years spent listening to the stories of families back home who had nothing left over at the end of the month, of families who were struggling to save for retirement, pay off loans, and simply make ends meet. These stories are not just unique to my district, but they were coming in from all across America to members of the House of Representatives. For too long, hardworking Americans toiled under a broken tax code filled with loopholes and special interest carve-outs. For most of the last decade, we had sluggish growth, stagnant wages, and limited opportunity across the country, including parts of Pennsylvania. When an economy is stagnant and not healthy, fewer job opportunities exist, and workers' hard-earned wages often do not keep up with expenses. Since being elected in 2012, I told my constituents that it did not have to be that way, that we could do better, that we deserved better. That is why 6 months ago, my colleagues and I passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and the President signed it into law. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act puts hardworking Americans first by allowing them to keep more of their paychecks, bringing businesses home from overseas, and creating that healthier economy. To help workers keep more of their wages, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act nearly doubled the standard deduction from $6,350 per individual to $12,000. And from $12,700 to $24,000 for married couples. This doubles the amount of income that will not be subject to federal income taxes. It also expands the child tax credit to $2,000 to help parents with the cost of raising kids, and adds a new credit to help provide care for elderly family members and adults with disabilities. With these changes, the zero tax bracket increases significantly. Consequently, more Americans will be fully exempt from federal income taxes, and they can keep more of their hard-earned wages. Additionally, before the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the United States had the highest business tax rates in the industrialized world. Pennsylvania's combined federal and state corporate tax rate stood at nearly 45%. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is removing a chokehold on our economy, decreasing for American corporations the tax rate from 35% to 21%, and consequently the Pennsylvania combined rate now stands at 31%. This puts American companies in a better place from a competitive standpoint than their Chinese and Mexican counterparts. Think about that. Prior to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, China was treating its companies better, Mexico was treating its companies better with lower tax rates, and you saw investments going into those countries. Now, with the United States having lower tax rates, it's turning around. This improvement, as well as other provisions such as the immediate expensing of new equipment, is causing companies to bring cash back from overseas and invest in America and hire workers and raise pay. Under the new system, small business employers, known as pass-through entities, your partnerships, your LLCs, will be able to deduct 20% of their qualified business income, and the remaining income will be taxed at new and lower rates. This translates into a significant tax cut for Main Street businesses, freeing up resources that will allow them to innovate and invest in their communities, hire workers, and increase wages. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act also established a program that will ensure that the benefits of our booming economy reach areas that have been historically overlooked, the Opportunity Zones program. States are identifying areas that have struggled with high poverty and sluggish economic growth. And the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act provides tax incentives to direct private investment into and reinvigorate these communities. These communities have been starved of robust capital investment for decades. That's about to change. In my district in western Pennsylvania, Governor Wolf from Pennsylvania has designated zones across the state. And in western Pennsylvania, in my district, we have tracts that have been designated in Beaver Falls, in Midland, in Johnstown, in Aliquippa. These are strong communities, Mr. Speaker, that once again once again can thrive thanks to the attractive tax incentives offered in the Opportunity Zones investment. This is how it's going to work. People may have an asset they've been holding for a long time and have a capital gain there. There's $6 trillion locked up in capital gains across this country. If somebody wants to make an investment in a community where there has not been investment, they can sell that asset, defer their capital gain, invest in that fund, and if they hold that in the fund for 10 years, they can defer the tax for that 10 years, get a stepped up in basis, and here's where it's great. They will not pay taxes on the appreciation of that investment in the Opportunity Zone. Think about that capital that can flow into those communities and stay there and grow a business. And that's private capital. It's different, say, from a government grant that might go in. You have individuals who are looking to make investment. They want that investment to grow. They want that investment to do well. They want that investment to prosper in these communities. This is good news for those communities and good news for people who live there and can get jobs as a result of the investments in these Opportunity Zones. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is not just about simplifying our tax code and saving people money. It's about empowering people in Pennsylvania throughout our nation with hope and opportunity to better their lives for themselves, their families, and their communities. These reforms within the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act are resulting in real benefits that are being experienced across the nation. Already 90% of American workers are receiving higher take-home pay under the new withholding tables. 4 million workers have received bonuses, raises, or expanded benefits, and over 1 million new jobs have been created, including 160,000 manufacturing jobs. For the first time in many years, there are more job openings than job seekers. Last month, the unemployment rate was 4%, nearly the lowest in decades, and unemployment rates for African Americans and Hispanics were at historic lows. 58% of small business owners are confident about hiring new employees, and more Americans are optimistic about their future. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is bringing workers who were pushed to the sidelines during the previous years back into the labor force and restoring hope to everyday Americans. In June, 600,000 people entered the labor force, and 213,000 new jobs were added. Businesses in my district are reinvesting in their employees, communities, and operations through bonuses, higher wages and salaries, and increased charitable giving. In Western Pennsylvania, PNC Bank and BNY Mellon have raised their employees' minimum wages. Companies including UPS, FedEx, and Home Depot that employ thousands of Western Pennsylvanians are providing bonuses and contributing more to their employees' retirement plans. In fact, the Hampton Township Home Depot location plans to create its own success sharing program. This is where hourly employees will be able to divide an estimated $30,000 to $40,000 among themselves semi-annually, twice a year. The Elwood Group, a steel manufacturer, is planning a $60 million addition to its Newcastle plant and adding 25 new employees once it is fully operational. Some who oppose the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act have touted these meaningful benefits to U.S. workers as crumbs. They have said that this law only helps the wealthy. But let me ask this. Is the Pennsylvania Utilities Commission requiring 17 of its utility companies to give a monthly credit to their customers, saving $320 million a year? Crumbs? Mr. Speaker, these aren't crumbs. These are seeds that are taking root and growing opportunities, creating jobs and unleashing the economy for all Americans to prosper. Don't just take it from me. Take it from John in New Kensington, who is seeing more money in his paycheck and received a $2,500 bonus. Take it from Brian in Winber, who's receiving $500 more a month. Michael in Aliquippa is bringing home an extra 4.5% in each paycheck. Edward in Westmoreland County is receiving $128 more per paycheck. That's more than $3,000 per year. Take it from Flory in Westmoreland County, who said that thanks to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, her family will have more money to use towards their son's postgraduate education. And Heidi from Allegheny County, who wrote to tell me that, quote, every penny we aren't taxed can go towards our other bills, such as food, utilities, school loans, a mortgage, and clothing for our children. We were barely scraping by in the previous The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is about empowering everyone, from the single mom in Ambridge, Pennsylvania, looking to buy her first home, to the entrepreneur in Beaver Falls, working to achieve his or her American dream. When our people can fully develop their God-given skills and talents in a competitive economy, without the government's excessive taxes and regulations, not only will our citizens' lives improve, but our country will go stronger. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for allowing the time today, and I would yield back the balance of my time.